Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're focusing on one towering figure in American history, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
FDR, yeah. The only U.S. president elected 4 times.
Exactly. And our mission isn't just to recount his life, but really to dig into his achievements, his path to power, and maybe most importantly, what lessons his leadership offers us today, especially through crisis.
Because he navigated 2 of the biggest crises imaginable, the Great Depression and almost all of World War II. It's a scale of leadership that's just, well, unparalleled.
It is. But let's start, maybe unexpectedly, with his beginnings. He came from serious wealth, right? Hyde Park, 1882.
Yeah.
The Roosevelts, the Delano.
Oh, absolutely. Privileged upbringing, homeschooled early on, then Groton, Harvard. And his political model, interestingly, was his cousin, Theodore Roosevelt. He definitely aimed to follow in those footsteps early on.
But that path took a dramatic, almost unbelievable turn.
It really did. August 1921, he's 39 years old, and he gets struck down by this paralytic illness. We generally think polio, maybe Guillain-Barré, but the result was permanent paralysis from the waist down.
Which, back then, for a politician, that sounds like career over. You know,
Yes.
leaders needed to project this image of physical power, of vigor.
Right. And this is where you see that incredible determination. It's fascinating. He refused to let it end his career. He actually taught himself to walk, sort of, short distances using heavy iron braces.
An immense effort.
Huge. And he managed his public image so carefully. He made sure the press essentially never caught him in his wheelchair. It was a necessary illusion, really, for political survival.
And it worked. His comeback as governor of New York, 1929 to 32. That period feels crucial.
Definitely. He was already tackling the economic downturn hitting New York, kind of using the state as a laboratory for relief programs, like a testing ground for what would become the New Deal.
Setting the stage perfectly for his presidency in 33. And he didn't waste any time that first 100 days.
Staggering is the word, the speed and scope. He pushed through major legislation immediately. Things like the Emergency Banking Act, ending prohibition.
That Banking Act, wasn't that more than just a law? It felt like a confidence booster, too.
Absolutely. It was psychological as much as financial. By letting only the solvent banks reopen after a brief holiday, it restored faith almost overnight. A massive, massive intervention.
And when we look at the lasting achievements, the things still with us, what stands out from the New Deal?
Well, beyond specific programs, it's the fundamental shift, establishing the government's ongoing role as, like, a safety net and a regulator. Think about the SEC, the FDIC ensuring bank deposits, the National Labor Relations Act, and, of course, Social Security.
These things really reshaped the relationship between the government and the individual citizen.
Completely redefined it. And his method was, as he put it, bold, persistent experimentation. He wasn't afraid to try things, see what worked, and, importantly, admit what didn't. Pragmatism.
But that approach must have drawn criticism. This sounds like a huge expansion of government power.
Oh, immense criticism. Constantly battling charges of overreach, of fundamentally changing the American system.
So how did he sell these radical changes to the public?
Through communication. Those famous fireside chats. He used the radio maybe 30 times to speak directly to people in their living rooms, explaining his plans, building trust. It was quite innovative.
Selling hope, but also explaining complex actions.
Exactly. And that skill, that ability to connect and mobilize became absolutely critical during World War II.
Right, leading the Allies alongside Churchill and Stalin. That's the familiar picture. But the domestic effort.
Unbelievable. Transforming the entire U.S. economy into the arsenal of democracy, mobilizing industry on a scale never seen before. That required just as much leadership as the military strategy.
And it's during this period he gives us some truly iconic words.
Yes, the most famous perhaps being after Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Powerful, defining words.
He was also thinking beyond the war itself, wasn't he? Towards the peace.
Very much so. He actually coined the term United Nations and was deeply involved in planning its structure, laying that groundwork even as the war raged.
So, looking back at his whole life, his achievements, the challenges, how do we sum up the lesson? There's that quote often used.
Ah, yes, the biographer's line. He lifted himself from a wheelchair to lift the nation from its knees. It's powerful because it connects his personal struggle to his national leadership.
It suggests that overcoming his own adversity gave him the perspective, maybe the courage, to tackle the nation's crisis.
I think that's right. It embodies leadership forged in fire, not just inherited. The courage to redefine what government could and should do when faced with unprecedented challenges.
It really is an incredible story of resilience and action. Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. FDR dramatically expanded the government's role in response to crisis. He argued for pragmatic experimentation.
Necessary action in an emergency.
So the question he leaves us with is perhaps this. Where is the line? When does necessary, bold action during a crisis transition into potentially permanent government overreach once the emergency has passed? How do we navigate that tension today?
That's a tough one. And maybe his most complex, enduring legacy.